Author's POV. In the dimly lit room of an upscale lounge, a man sat in the shadows. None other than Jungkook's enemy, Lee Sung-hoon. His fingers tapping against the glass of whiskey in his hand. His sharp gaze was fixed on the photographs spread out before him. Each one captured a different moment Jungkook and YN together. Some were in the office, where Jungkook's lingering gaze on YN was evident. Others were more private, Jungkook holding her waist as she stumbled, their fingers brushing as he handed her a document. The way his expression softened whenever she was near. A smirk played on the man's lips. So, the almighty Chun Jungkook has a weakness, he murmured. A figure in a sleek black suit stepped forward from the shadows, his informant, the one who had been watching Jungkook for weeks. It seems she's more than just an employee to him, the spy confirmed. There's something between them, and if we use her, we can bring Jungkook down. The man chuckled darkly, lifting one of the photos. It was the perfect shot, YN looking up at Jungkook, with an expression of something deeper, something that could be mistaken for love. Then let's make her the reason he loses everything. YN's POV. I've been avoiding him, avoiding the way my heart races whenever he's near. Jungkook is too much. Too powerful, too charismatic. And yet, it's not that simple. I didn't want to admit it to myself, but I can't ignore how my body reacts to him. I thought I could. But every time he's close, every time our eyes meet, something inside me stirs. When he confessed to me on the rooftop, I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell him that I felt the same pull, the same desire. But I couldn't. I couldn't let myself be weak, let myself fall for him. I'm here to work, to take care of my responsibilities. My mother needs me. I need to keep my head clear, and I can't do that if I'm distracted by him. I pushed him away because it was safer. For both of us. He's the CEO. I'm just a part-time worker. I can't afford to let myself believe in something that isn't real. Besides, I don't want the attention. I don't want to be the subject of gossip. Or worse, the reason he might lose focus. I can't let myself become a distraction for him or anyone else. But when I saw him in the office after so many days, after everything, I felt a tightness in my chest that I couldn't explain. It was guilt, but it was also something else. I wanted to comfort him. I wanted to tell him everything would be okay. But I can't. I'm not the one who's supposed to make him feel better. And even if I wanted to, I can't afford to care. Jungkook's POV. I told myself I'd stop thinking about her. Stop letting her consume me. But every time I look at her, I see the way she avoids my gaze, the way she shuts me out. It's like she doesn't even care. And it drives me mad. So I decided to take a different approach. I became cold. I made sure my words cut deeper than they should. I pushed her harder and demanded more from her, even though I knew she was already stretched thin. It felt like the only way I could punish her for rejecting me. Maybe if I made her feel as empty as I did, she'd realize what she lost. I started spending more time with Anna. It was simple. She was there when I needed a distraction, when I needed someone who didn't look at me like I was the problem. She was always smiling, always ready to offer me her attention. And for once, I didn't have to pretend to be something I wasn't. I wanted YN to see it. I wanted to see the jealousy in her eyes. It was childish, I knew. But I couldn't stop myself. Watching YN from across the room, seeing the way she clenched her jaw whenever Anna and I shared a laugh or a conversation, felt like some kind of sick victory. She didn't deserve my attention, not after everything she said on that rooftop. I was just giving her a taste of what she wanted, nothing. But even as I spent more time with Anna, part of me couldn't ignore the growing guilt inside me. I couldn't pretend I wasn't still thinking about YN, but I pushed it down, burying it with work and more distractions. I couldn't let myself care anymore. YN's POV. The night air is crisp as I step out of the hospital. My mom's soft words still echoing in my ears. She smiled at me today, telling me I looked tired and should rest more. If only she knew the real reason behind my exhaustion. I tighten my coat around me as I walk down the dimly lit street, my heart heavier than ever. Every day, the weight of my feelings for him grows unbearable, pressing down on me like an invisible force. But what can I do? Nothing. Watching him become colder, more distant, is a cruel reminder that I no longer have a place in his life. I try to tell myself it doesn't matter, that I don't care, that it's for the best. But the lie shatters every time I see him with Anna. The way he smiles at her, the way she touches his arm, the way they exchange glances, it cuts through me like a blade. A look I know I'll never get from him. I let out a shaky breath, my steps slowing as I reach the alley leading to my apartment. My fingers tighten around my bag. I hate how much this affects me. I hate how his coldness has turned into a war I can't fight. If I react, if I break down, he wins. And I can't let that happen. I blink away the tears threatening to spill. I won't cry. Not for him. So, I bury myself in work. I do everything he asks. I push through the exhaustion, the heartache, the suffocating weight of it all. Because what other choice do I have? A sharp gust of wind makes me shiver as I walk faster, my apartment just a few blocks away. But suddenly I hear footsteps behind me. My heart clenches. I turn my head slightly, just enough to see a shadow moving closer. A chill runs down my spine. I pick up my pace. But the footsteps match mine. My hands tremble as I clutch my phone, ready to call someone, anyone. But before I can act, a hand grabs my wrist, yanking me back. A scream gets caught in my throat. Author's POV. A group of men stepped out from the shadows, their figures towering over her. Their smirk sent a shiver down her spine. "You're quite the lucky woman, aren't you?" One of them sneered, stepping closer. "To have Jungkook wrapped around your little finger." YN's heart pounded. "Who are you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. They chuckled darkly. "Just some people here to give you a warning. He is not the guy you think of, so be careful." Before she could react, one of them grabbed her wrist tightly, yanking her closer. "But then again, it'd be a waste not to have a little fun before we let you go." Fear shot through her like ice, but she clenched her jaw. She wasn't going to let them do anything to her. She struggled, trying to pull away, but another man grabbed her shoulder. "Let me go," she yelled, her voice desperate. "Feisty one." Another chuckled, pressing closer. Tears burned her eyes, her mind racing for a way out. But just as panic threatened to consume her, a loud voice cut through the air. "I'd let her go if I were you." A deadly silence followed. The men turned, only to find two figures standing at the entrance of the alley: Taehyung and Park Jimin. Taehyung's sharp eyes darkened dangerously. His jaw clenched as he assessed the situation. Jimin, usually calm and playful, looked like a ticking time bomb. One of the men scoffed. "And who the hell are you?" Jimin tilted his head, rolling his shoulders. "That's funny. Shouldn't you be more concerned about how you're going to get out of here in one piece?" Before they could react, Taehyung moved first. A powerful punch landed on one guy's face, sending him crashing to the ground. The others barely had time to register what happened before Jimin lunged forward, delivering a brutal kick to another's stomach. YN gasped as the grip on her loosened, and she stumbled back. Jimin immediately grabbed her wrist and pulled her behind him protectively. "You okay?" he asked softly, his voice dripping with concern despite the rage in his eyes. She nodded shakily. Meanwhile, Hyun grabbed one of the remaining men by the collar, slamming him against the brick wall. Who sent you? He growled. The man whimpered but refused to speak. Jimin cracked his knuckles, stepping closer with an eerie smirk. Let me ask instead. The men, now beaten and terrified, quickly scrambled to escape. Taehyung let out a frustrated breath, watching them disappear into the night. Cowards, he muttered. Jimin turned to YN, his features softening. Let's get out of here. She nodded again, feeling overwhelmed. And as Taehyung gently draped his coat over her shoulders and Jimin kept a protective arm around her, one thought burned in her mind. Jungkook. Would he ever know about this? Would he even care? YN sat on the bench outside a small cafe, still shaken from what had just happened. Taehyung handed her a water bottle as Jimin stood in front of her, both watching her with unreadable expressions. The silence stretched between them until she finally spoke. Don't tell anyone about this. Jimin frowned. What? YN, are you serious? You were just harassed. I mean it, she cut in, her voice firm but quiet. Don't tell anyone, especially Jungkook. At her words, both Taehyung and Jimin exchanged a knowing glance. They didn't miss the way her voice softened slightly at his name, the way her fingers gripped the fabric of her sleeves tightly, as if holding back something. Taehyung crossed his arms. Why? Wei-in hesitated before sighing. I just don't want to cause trouble. I don't want him to get involved in this. Jimin scoffed, shaking his head. You really think he wouldn't care? He'd probably burn the whole city down if he found out. Taehyung raised an eyebrow. Speaking of Jungkook, why did you reject him? YN looked down at her lap, biting her lip. Because I can't afford to get involved in this. In him. My life has never been easy, and I don't want to drag him into my mess. Taehyung sighed. That's the dumbest excuse I've ever heard. She shot him a glare. Excuse me? Jimin chuckled. You heard him. You think Jungkook gives a damn about your mess? The man has been losing his mind over you. YN swallowed, feeling a lump in her throat. She didn't want to admit that she had been thinking about him just as much, that his cold behavior towards her had been hurting her more than she let on. Shaking her head, she changed the subject. What were you two even doing in that alley? Taehyung and Jimin tensed for a split second before Jimin casually shrugged. Oh, you know. We had some business in the area and just so happened to hear you. YN narrowed her eyes suspiciously. Business? Taehyung smirked. Yep. She wasn't convinced. There was something they weren't telling her. But right now, she was too exhausted to question it. She glanced sideways at Jimin, her voice laced with suspicion. Mr. Park, I never knew you knew how to be angry and beat people up. Jimin froze for a moment, a brief flicker of panic crossing his face before he managed a strained laugh. What? His voice cracked slightly, betraying his nerves. Wine's arms crossed over her chest as she raised a brow, the corner of her lips curling in disbelief. You don't exactly seem like the type to get violent. I mean, you're always smiling and acting like you don't have a single worry in the world. But back there, you looked like you were ready to kill someone. The air around them shifted. Jimin, clearly uncomfortable under her scrutiny, laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. I was just, reacting in the moment. Self-defense and all that. Taehyung, sensing the tension, casually interjected with a smirk. Yeah, right. Jimin shot him an irritated glare, but Taehyung merely shrugged, a knowing grin on his face. Yain wasn't convinced. Her suspicion grew as she narrowed her eyes, feeling something wasn't being fully disclosed. Taehyung, ever the one to change the subject when things got too heavy, slung an arm around Jimin's shoulder, pulling him closer. What Jimin meant to say was that he used to be a taekwondo champion back in high school. Right, Jimin? Jimin blinked, his confusion evident. Huh? Taehyung's elbow jabbed him lightly, a cue that Jimin immediately picked up on. Right? Oh, yeah. Totally. Black belt and everything. Jimin blurted out, nodding quickly. You know, just had to put my skills to use today. YN didn't buy it for a second, her eyes narrowing further. Taehyung quickly changed the subject before she could press, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Anyway, let's get you home, YN. You've had a long day. YN, still puzzled but too tired to argue, allowed the subject to drop for now. But in the back of her mind, a nagging suspicion lingered, a sense that there was more to Jimin and Taehyung's involvement in what had happened than they were willing to admit. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were hiding something bigger than they were letting on. Letting out a tired sigh, she stood up. Just promise me you won't tell Jungkook, please. Jimin clicked his tongue in frustration but nodded. Fine, but you owe us an explanation one day. Author's POV. Jungkook sat in his office, his jaw clenched as he read the report in front of him. One of his most valuable shipments had been intercepted last night. His enemies were getting bold. Too bold. His fingers tapped against the desk rhythmically as he turned to Taehyung and Jimin, who stood across from him. It's time we send a message. Taehyung smirked. I was hoping you'd say that. Jimin crossed his arms. I already looked into it. They stored the stolen goods in their warehouse near the docks. But that's not all. That place is packed with illegal weapons and smuggled goods. If we burn it down, not only will they lose millions, but they'll also have the authorities breathing down their necks. Jungkook's eyes darkened. Then let's make it happen. The warehouse was engulfed in flames, thick smoke rising into the night sky. The fire roared, reflecting in Jungkook's cold gaze as he watched from a distance. Taehyung and Jimin stood beside him, their expressions unreadable. The crackling of burning wood and metal filled the air, mixed with the distant wails of sirens. The fire department wouldn't make it in time. By the time they did, everything inside would be nothing but ashes. A warning. Jungkook pulled out a cigarette, lighting it with the fire's glow. He took a slow drag, exhaling as his phone buzzed in his pocket. He already knew who it was. A smirk tugged at his lips as he answered. Took you long enough. A furious voice barked through the line. Jungkook, do you have any idea what you've done? Jungkook let out a low chuckle, flicking ash to the ground. Oh, I know exactly what I've done. And so do you. You bastard. That warehouse was worth millions. Was, Jungkook corrected, his tone dripping with mockery. Now? Just a pile of ash. A shame, really. The man on the other end growled. You think this is over? You stole from me first. Jungkook's smirk vanished, his expression turning ice cold. I don't steal. Unlike you, I do business clean. And if you ever try to mess with my shipments again... He took another slow drag of his cigarette. I won't stop at your warehouse. There was a pause, followed by a low chuckle. You think you're untouchable, don't you? I heard you have a little distraction these days. Jungkook's entire body went rigid. His grip on the phone tightened, his jaw clenching. What did you just say? The man laughed. Nothing. Just saying, a man like you shouldn't have weaknesses. It makes things so much more interesting. Jungkook's blood ran cold. His mind immediately went to YN. They knew. The next second, the line went dead. Jungkook's fist tightened around the phone, his knuckles turning white. Jimin and Taehyung, having heard enough, exchanged looks.